And then we'll welcome listeners to the CEO Secrets for Executing Strategy podcast. The CEO Secrets for Executing Strategy podcast is a podcast by CEOs for CEOs seeking to sustain profitability to fund manage growth. I'm Wayne Washington, founder and CEO of Grow Company Profits. All of my CEO guests successfully operate companies with annual revenues in excess of $3 million. Today, my guest is Rod McDermott. He's the CEO of a company called McDermott and Bull, an executive search firm. And I'm not going to say a lot about it. I'm going to let Rod do most of the talking about what McDermott and Bull is. Rod, it is a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Wayne, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Okay, and how I usually try to get started. I wanted to get right to it, and what I usually start to do is what is the starter story for McDermott and Bull? How long you guys been around? What was the idea that got you started? Why'd you start? Why'd you start?
Yeah, so, we've been around, gosh, 21 years, over 21 years now. Chris Bull and I worked for a top five global search firm out of Chicago. We were here in Southern California back in 2000, and we were being heavily recruited by actually the largest company in the world in our space, as well as a few other companies. And we had both had our own businesses in the past, and we were kind of joined at the hip at our old firm. And so one night in December of 2000, it was weird. I just had my third child. My wife had, I should say, December 4th of that month of that year. And then we just moved into a brand new house 2 weeks later. So we're at my new house, and it's me and my wife and Chris and his wife sitting in our dining room. And we're saying, okay, we can stay where we're at. They treat us well. They give us what we need. We can go to this other platform, which is the biggest company globally in our space, and they're really coming after us hard. Or there might be, door number three. And what does that look like? And it might be doing our own thing. And so we started going down that road, and we got very excited about what we could create ourselves. And so we went forward in January of 2001. Didn't take a lot. About a month later, we started our business, and have been going strong ever since. Ironically, we started in a recession. We had the tech bubble bursting in 2001, obviously 9/11. So it was a little bit of a hard time, but it was a good time. We gutted it out, and we started building our team, and we've grown our company ever since.
When you think back at that time and that decision process where you had some options between three different options, what was the tipping point that made you decide to go on your own?
So we had ideas on what we could create in terms of a company and how we thought we might be able to do it differently and better. But more importantly, we also talked about what it is we wanted in our lives. In our industry, the search consultants they're the builders, right? They bring in the revenue, they make usually some level of commission off of that. It's either a commission or it's very calculated. It's like being a partner at a law firm. You can kind of calculate what your take home is going to be, and you're kind of mercenary, right? And that's okay, and you can live a pretty good life and all that. But we had a bigger vision. We had a vision that we wanted to live kind of very extraordinary lives and do the same thing for our employees. And so we thought that might be a better platform for us. And so we got really excited about that and what kind of culture we could create. And I will tell you, it's evolved tremendously. I mean, we had some big ideas early on, and some worked and some didn't. And then we had some good ideas later. And I think the later ideas were actually better than the early ideas. Sometimes you have to go through a lot of failure to find success. And I feel like failure is the best teacher. And so we failed a lot.
And that's a common story when I talk to my CEO guests. They fail a lot, and as you failed a lot, as you went through the process of trying this, it didn't work. Where did it come? Where was that tipping point that says we can do this? This will work. Let's just keep on doing it. I mean, was it early on? How long did it take you to get to that point?
So yeah, Wayne, it was pretty early. I'll tell you this, and this is a story. Bianca's heard this before. Some of our people in our company have heard this before, but not everybody has heard this. We haven't shared it with everybody, but we have Chris and I, when we founded the company, we never put a dime into it. The irony is, about 2 weeks before we started the company, we went to talk to a client, a prospect, I should say, And we just had a meeting scheduled with the guy, and we said, hey, we want to let you know we're going to leave our company. We're putting things in place now. And he's like, where are you guys going? Where are you going to office? We don't know. And he walks us down the hall. He had some vacant space. And he said, why don't I rent this space to you? It's 3,000 square feet. We literally could have played a football game in there. I mean, there were two of us, right? And he's like, how are you going to fund your company? We're like, yeah, we don't know. We haven't determined how much capital we're going to need to contribute and all that. He goes, I wanted to talk to you guys about one search, but when you guys get started, I want to kick off 4 with you. And he goes, I'm going to pay you a nice big retainer. And so he gave us this check even before we had a bank account.
Wow.
And we walked into a bank that happened to be in the building that we were at and said, we'd like to open a bank account. And they're like, well, you got to file all these statements with the county to fictitious business. And we didn't even know all this stuff. And so we had to do all that. So the irony is that money got us started, and it wasn't a huge amount of money. It was $32,000, but it was enough to get going. And one time in about 4, 5, 6 months, we had payroll coming up, right? And I told Chris, and I said, listen, we're down pretty low on cash right now. So bring in your checkbook tomorrow. We're going to have a capital call from the two of us and to make payroll. So we both brought our checkbooks in, and lo and behold, in the mail, we had a $20,000 check from one of our clients that owed us some money, and it just showed up. And I'm like, wow. And so to this day, I mean, we've been around 20 years. We've built hundreds of millions in revenue over that period of time. As of last year, our firm did about 28 million. So we never put a dime in the business, and not one dime. And it's a weird story. I get a few of our employees know it. I've shared it with a few, and some of them say, don't tell anybody that. Because it's, now subsequent businesses I've started, we started our interim leaders business about 10 years ago, and that business will do probably 13 million this year. It cost us $1 million to make that work,
Okay.
And our coaching business, Activate 180, we started 3 years ago, and that is probably going to be our fastest growing division. I want to tell you a little bit about it. It's a great business. And we're now billing regularly. We're at a run rate now of close to $1 million a year now. We're billing out at, 55 a month and ramping pretty quick to about 80, 90 a month in the next month or two.
Great.
That's great. But I put $1.5 million of my own money into this thing. So the first one's kind of easy because I didn't have any money after that, and it was all sweat. But after that, we sunk some money in. So I would say, though, to answer your question, I mean, we knew early on because we had a client, and then we always made sure we put our foot on the gas of business development, right? We had to make sure our foot was on that pedal. And so it was either Chris or it was me, one or the other, or both of us. If one of us was busy with searches, the other one would be doing more BD. And as partners, we would sit down every Monday and meet, and we would talk about what's in the pipeline. What do we need to close? What's the work in process? When are we going to be out of business? In our business, you never know where your next piece of business is coming from. You never, ever know where it's coming from. It's so weird. And you can kind of rest for 90 days based on what you've got going, because it takes about 90 days to finish your projects. But other than that, you're at 90 days, you're out of business, right? So we always made sure we ran it like a sales organization with pipeline meetings and everything else.
Well, when I'm sitting here listening to you, Rod, it makes it sound like everything was peaches and cream and everything was rosy as it went along. And I know that's not true. I mean, I know there were some hurdles. I know there's some hiccups. I mean, you got to that one hiccup where you almost had to dig in your pocket to fund payroll. But there are other types of hurdles that come up. Help bring some reality to the discussion. What were some of those hurdles and hiccups that you had to shake your head, you worried about, but you kept going?
Hey, Wayne, the question is, where do I start? So many, right? When we started, Chris and I would go offsite twice a year for 2 days, and we'd bring up this big white poster paper, and we'd be writing down, okay, we're going to open up in Chicago and Nashville and Atlanta, and a search consultant's going to bring in 200,000 year one and 500,000, then $1 million, and by the time we were done with our 2 days, we were $100 million company in the next 5 years, right? It didn't go that way. It never does. It was really hard bringing in other people who could sell like we could sell. And we would fail probably 4 out of 5 times, literally 4 out of 5. We'd bring in people and 1 out of 5 would succeed. And we've gotten better at that over time, but we struggled, and then we built our business. We got to about 6 million in 2007. And then in 2008, the Great Recession hit in Q4. We also lost one of our big billers in the beginning of that year who went to go work for a global firm. So January, he took 1.7 million out of the business. So by rights, we should have dropped down to about 4.3. But what happened is, and this is something that's kind of interesting, he was a guy who sucked a lot of air out of the room. Sometimes you get these big billers that are prima donnas and you can't live with them and you can't live without them, right? Well, I'm here to tell you, live without them. I've had 2 instances where I've employed big billers like this that were prima donnas. And in both cases, I didn't have the courage to pull the trigger myself. And I really wish I had, because we were better for it later. This particular person is actually a really good guy, but he was a really rough person. He broke a lot of glass, and that he operated from fear and just walking around the company. He broke so much glass that it sucked a lot of resources. So what happened in 2008, we thought we were going to drop significantly. He leaves in January of 08. Everybody else got lighter and they grew.
Wow.
And so by Q3, we had built a lot. We ended the year at 5.8. So we didn't drop 1.7 million. We dropped 200,000. And that was only because Q4 of 2008, the world was falling apart. I don't know if you remember, but September, AIG got a big bailout. Fannie and Freddie failed. Lehman Brothers failed. The auto industry failed. I mean, our business just tanked. And so 2009, we went from almost 6 million in 8, 6 million in 7, almost 6 million in 8, down to 2.4 million. Wow. That was a real struggle. And we had to crawl our way back from that. And we had to rebuild the company. And I'll tell you, it was a trying moment for us because we rebuilt it differently than we built it the first go around. Now, I'd love to share a little bit of that with you as well, but that was a big challenge for us.
I want to touch base on, we'll hopefully have time to get to that, but if we don't, maybe we could schedule another time to get together.
Yeah.
When you drop down like that, when you look yourself in the mirror and you do your guts, your soul searching, what did you have to do differently? What did you have to do to pull yourself out of that rut right there? I mean, because mentally you had to be going through anguish, and not only look at the economy, looking at your family, looking at your company, that had to be all negative things against you. How'd you pull out?
Yeah, it was a really tough time. It was a tough moment. I remember having conversations with my wife, and I'm like, all the stuff we have, and I don't know if I ever shared with you, I'm a pilot and I had a plane, and she's like, well, maybe you sell the plane and I'm sure you'll own another one someday. And she goes, we live in this nice big house, and I don't care if we live in an apartment. I just want our family together. And so I had this great support system at home where my wife, she didn't care about things. She just cared about our family being close and connected. And she reminded me that, this is all about the journey, right? It's all about life's journey is going to have bumps in the road, and it's about how you respond to them and about how you show up. And so I went from, anguish many days to energized and said, okay, all right, who's going to show up? I got this 12 round boxing match with Mike Tyson. That's called the economy, right? And that's pummeling me in the head. And how am I going to show up for this fight? And it really empowered me. And then the other thing was, we don't have investors. We don't have shareholders. At that time, we didn't have any outside shareholders but the 2 of us. We don't have to do anything crazy. Let's just go out here and play our game and win our game for us and our employees. And so that's what we did. And I will tell you, there was very specific things I did when I started managing cash on a daily basis. And I still do that now. It's funny, we have a decent amount of cash in the bank, but my controller still sends me every night an email with cash in each of our different accounts. That's a holdover from the recession, because we did that. It's like people that lived through the Great Depression, they had those like Depression era habits that they did. This is Great Recession habits. I still do that. I still look at our AR and our work in process to figure out kind of what cash flow is coming in the next 90 days and make sure we're looking at that well. So, I want to make sure that our overhead doesn't tank us. And so I look at those things, but that's how I show up. I just want to make sure that I've got the right plan in place. And usually I like to have a plan A and a plan B and a plan C.
Well, and sitting here listening to you as you discussed it, you got some advice from your support group, but it came to some point, it came to a point where you had to look yourself in the mirror, make a decision, and say it. I'm going to make this happen. I mean, is that a fair statement?
Yeah, and it was about activity. It was about, when business was tanking and the phone wasn't ringing, it's like, okay, everybody get on the phones who can get on the phones. Let's get some meetings. And in our business, in recessions, your current clients buy less or nothing. Future clients are really hard to come by.
Uh-huh.
And most of your competitors, I remember calling some of the guys I worked at our old firm. I was still friends with them at the time. And many of them have long since retired, but in 08, 09, they were still at it. And I'm like, what's going on? They're like, there's no business out there. And I'm thinking to myself, there's not no business. There's just a lot less. And
Okay.
I'm going to go get that. And I love the fact that my competitors have this tape that they're playing in their head that says there's no business, because that's not true. There always is business. Apple didn't have a great recession. Google did not have a great recession. Those companies continue to thrive during those times. So in our business, you just got to find them, right? Find the ones that are thriving. We had healthcare clients that were thriving.
You
And
know what?
so,
You it's music to my ears when you say what you say, because the models in my mind are the Googles and the Apples. In other words, they started in their garages, they started small, and look to where they grew. And it's the mindset that they kept the whole way through, the mindset of them and the mindset of their culture. And that's why I'll make a little transition right now, because you had said something earlier, before we got on air, about collaboration inclusion, really the inclusion where you open your books up to all your employees. That's a bold step for any CEO to do. And I heard you also talk about you had that prima donna and you were glad he left. I mean, there's a huge change from that prima donna to a culture of inclusion where we're sharing our information. Help us understand that transition and why you got to the point where you had to do that.
yeah. So, and I'll just say this about the prima donnas that we all work with here and there. And they're not bad people. It's just their style generally takes more than gives, right?
Right.
And so you generally, those are the people that you're cleaning up glass that they broke, and people are coming to you and saying, I just had this really bad interaction. And I will tell anybody out there that's listening, my experience is this: the times that I haven't had the courage to do it, I regret. Ultimately, they do it themselves. They pull themselves out, and it's happened both times, and we're better off for it. And I look back and I said, what do I learn? I've learned this lesson now twice. And I want to be the one who says, hey, here's our norms. Here's how we're going to operate. We're not going to treat people like this. And if we are, I don't care if you bring in 1.7 million or 4 million or what it is, you got to go. We're not going to be the place for you. And, the other person that left right before the COVID recession hit, literally, I mean, we had 4 million walk out the door. And I'm telling you what, in that business unit, we are on fire because we replaced that person with some amazing people that have just energized the growth of the entire team. And, that business should grow from, it was 6 million back then. It did 7 last year. It'll go to 13 this year. And we're on track for hitting hopefully 20 next year. So couldn't have done that if this other, yeah, thank you. Couldn't have done that if this other person was here. And that's just one of our business units. So back to the open book thing, we, a number of us went to this conference that it's called The Great Game of Business. And they talk about open book management. And they taught us about this concept of, every employee is a player on the field, right? So imagine there's no scoreboard. They can't see the score and how the game is going because you're not letting them know. You're just saying, do your job. Here's your personal scoreboard. But they want to know, well, when does the company win? And, and how can I impact that? And so it's really, it's fairly ironic that most companies don't open their books to their employees, yet their employees are their teammates on the field. It's just so weird, right? And we didn't for years. First started when we made partners back in 2010, 11 timeframe, and they come on board and they started asking questions, and I was a little afraid of transparency for 2 reasons, Wayne. I'm like probably a lot of CEOs out there. I suffer from what I call red cape syndrome. I got red cape syndrome.
Okay.
I got to be the guy who flies in and saves the day, right? That's my job. I got to be the smartest guy in the room. I got to be the guy who's got the best ideas. And I felt that as the CEO of our company that I had to be that person. And we started opening things up, and I started talking a little bit less, and I started letting other people raise up. And it turns out they weren't offended by the profits we were making. They were empowered by it. And it's like, okay, how do we keep growing? How do we do more? How do we reinvest more of that in the business to make even more? They loved it, and they brought ideas. And so that was my first experience with some level of transparency.
Uh-huh.
And then as I started to share with you, we started selling part of our business to an employee stock ownership company last year. And so now the employees are essentially shareholders in our business. And so we decided, let's let them know how it's going. And so about a month ago, we had everybody together, and we rented out a big conference room, and we had, about 60, 70 people. And we went through our entire income statement for 2021 and for Q1 2022. And we showed everybody where they live on that income statement. And we taught them cost of goods sold. We taught them gross profit margin. We taught them selling general administrative expenses and operating profit. We showed them debt and interest and things like this. And it was really empowering for people, because now they understand how they can keep score. And it dawned on me then. I'm like, why haven't we been doing this for 20 years? It's just so stupid.
That's such a perfect analogy, because one of the things, and this is somewhat of a side, it's a big thing in my business, is keeping score. I mean, if you're not keeping score, how do you know? Well, I had just a somewhat of example. My son, at 5 years old, he was on soccer, and I was one of his coaches on the field, and they would say, we're not keeping score. We're just teaching the kids how to play soccer so they know the fundamentals. Every dad there had a score. They knew what the score was as that game went on. So scorekeeping has been a big part of everybody's life going forward. I need to get ready to start to wind down here a little bit, Rod. And one question I try to ask my CEOs, and I'd appreciate getting this from you. What makes you a good CEO?
That's a great question. I don't know that I would say I'm a good CEO. I would say I'm a continuously improving CEO, mostly
Okay.
because I'm committed to it. So, one of the things I shared with you, Chris and I have had an executive coach for 20 years, and we actually started a coaching company about 3 years ago, not the executive level only, which there's a lot of executive coaches out there, but really to coach all levels of the company. And one of the things we realized is our real rocket fuel in our business is not us at the top of the ship. It's the people that are helping propel our business.
Yep.
Yet we're not helping them play their best. Our coaches helped us play our best. Why aren't we helping these people? And so we started this new company called Activate 180 that coaches all levels of companies so that everybody can show up and be their best selves when they're on that field playing that game. And so, that's part of this continuous improvement thing. It's like, well, it's not just for us, it's for everybody. The other thing, I feel proud of this. I'm not sure it makes me a good CEO, but I feel proud of this. I have a belief that I've adopted probably over the last 10 years. And it's a Zig Ziglar saying. I'm sure you've heard of Zig Ziglar. He had this one saying, I can have everything I want in life if I just help enough other people get what they want.
Uh-huh.
And that really spoke to me and spoke to my heart. And that's been my guiding principle for probably the last 10 years or so. Prior to that, it was like, build. So we got to get people, we got to, and now it's about creating opportunities for people to live great lives. And that's kind of a holistic approach to the whole human being. It's not just, me wanting our people to show up great at work. It's me wanting them to be having their best lives. And if we, as a place that they spend most of their waking hours at, can help them achieve that. And that's really what our coaching does. And when we launched it internally at my company. And then I started having friends say, hey, I want that. And so now we're coaching about 350 people, and we've got a prospect list that's going to get us probably to like 3,000 people by the end of this year. And a lot of companies that are wanting to take it on. And so we keep hiring. We've got 50 coaches. But what's happened is we look at a person holistically through 5 different pillars, and career is only one of those pillars. And if we help that person show up at their best in all these 5 pillars, health and wellness, relationships, finance, life experiences, things like that, and career, they're going to show up great at their work, at their companies, and we can help propel them. So I think my viewpoint on individuals is not just kind of a cog in my wheel, but more of what can I do to help them be their best and live their best lives. That's what I think. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't know if it makes me a good CEO, but it certainly gives me a lot of pleasure to see my people living their best lives.
Well, you know what? I'm not going to qualify whether it makes you a good CEO or not good CEO. What it does make you is a complete CEO because you're looking at the complete person, and you're looking at how do I make that person. I've always been a believer. If yeah, everybody who comes to work has problems at home. They have issues at home. They have things that are not work related. If I can help them solve their problems or help them achieve their dreams, they in turn are going to help me. So it's the same thought you said. Help someone else. That's a heck of philosophy to have, and I'm glad to hear another CEO has that type of philosophy. I'm quite sure some of the things you just said. There are some people who are going to want to get a hold of you. How can people get a hold of you, Rod?
Yeah, so it's easy. My email is mcdermott@mbexec.com. I've also got an Activate 180 email, but we can leave it at mbexec. And I'm an open book. I'd be happy to talk to anybody. As I said, my purpose is, creating opportunities for people to live great lives. If I could leave like just 2 or 3 points too, I'd love to
Sure.
close with a couple of thoughts. One of the things we learned coming out of the Great Recession is that we managed everybody so tightly prior to that because there were two of us. It didn't give people room to grow. And so coming out of that, we made a conscious effort. We were going to hire more experienced and better leaders. We were going to take the people internally that were really great and develop them more, spend more money on developing them, and also paying them accordingly. We used to have high turnover because we would pay at the low end of the range.
Okay.
Now we pay at the higher end of the range, and I've got some senior folks that have been with me, more than a dozen years now.
Okay.
And it took a while to reduce that turnover. But the big things were move your people up, give them a vision and an objective, and then get out of their way and let them fail. Most of the failures aren't fatal, but they learn from them. And since we've done that, I had a friend of mine I was having lunch with. He's a local Business Journal publisher about 2 years ago. And he's like, you guys are an overnight success after 20 years. It took us till 2015 to get back to 6 million. But between 2015 and 2021, we grew from 6 million to 27 million.
And that's outstanding.
And the reason is we let everybody fly.
Right. That's inspiring. I think that's the word that comes to my mind. That's inspiring. And you had the perseverance. You stuck to it. You knew you weren't doing some things right. You found out what I had to change to do things differently. You did it. And you're reaping the rewards of it now. And I'll sit here and I'll just give you an applaud because I think you've done a very good job in what you've done, Ron.
Thank you.
We have to get ready to sign off here. And I try to keep this to a half an hour to respect our audience's time also. So, Chris, Rod, I really appreciate you being here. And Rod and I would like to thank you, CEO audience, for spending time with us today as we had two CEOs having a simple conversation about CEO things. The things that Rod shared today, I'm quite sure some of you found some nuggets in there you want to explore more. So please do. But anyway, we'll be back here next week. We drop a new podcast every week. Next week, we'll have another amazing CEO guest who has driven their company in excess of $3 million in annual revenue. So please feel free to come back next week and share some time with me and my next guest. I'm glad everybody was around today and look forward to seeing everybody next week. Bye now. Let me turn off recording. Hold on a second if I can find out where my mouse is. Oh, there it is. All right, we are out.
Nice. How was that?
You know what?